Hey everybody, welcome to episode 5 of Cleaning Code with Doc Norton. I'm Doc Norton. In this episode, we are going to continue our work with JDepend with a focus on the FileManager as we continue to kind of move things around and figure out maybe what this should look like. The source is available over on GitHub, doc on dev, JDepend, and you can look at the various episodes to follow along. So we've got 1, 2, I should push 3 up there. Sorry, I didn't do that. 4, and then of course this is episode 5, and I'll push that up there before this episode is finally released. And if you want to get the original source, of course, that's on Clarkware JDepend. So again, this episode continuing with FileManager and cleaning up some of the stuff that's in there. I have gone a bit ahead in my efforts here, and I can guarantee you that over the course of the next couple of episodes, we will completely eliminate FileManager from this project entirely. So if you're interested in how that happens, certainly keep watching. But let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so here we are in FileManager, same place we've been for a while now. And we're going to go ahead and move down to our extract files and collect files. The thing about this that's bugging me right now is extract files returns a collection of files. That's fine. But it passes that collection into collect files, which then takes that collection and passes it to this AddFile method in a couple of circumstances, as well as recursively calling itself, passing along the whole files collection. And what I really want to do is I want to get rid of that. I just think it's a weird smell. I would much rather that these methods return back a collection than modify one of their incoming parameters. Before we even do that, though, or as we head in that direction, first thing I want to do is look at this AddFile. It's being called twice, and I believe all it's doing is adding this file to the collection of files that came passed in. So let's look and make sure it's doing that. And sure enough, it gets the file, it gets the collection, and it says, hey, if that file is not in the collection, then go ahead and add it. I don't think this guard clause is actually necessary. One, the list of files should be unique to begin with. But even if it's not, rather than checking for everyone before we add it, we can actually tell it to return a unique list at the end. But I don't think that's necessary. So let's find out. If we actually get rid of that part of it and run our tests, does anything fail? I'm willing to bet that it doesn't. I think that this is all still going to work. Yep. Okay. So now AddFile basically is adding the file. So let's just go ahead and come back up here and let's inline that and inline all and remove the method. Boom. Okay. So simple little cleanup, but we've got at least one place that we're no longer passing the file to another method. So let's go ahead. We've run the tests. Let's go ahead and save that. Remove AddFile method. Status is clean. And we are currently on episode 5. Good. Okay. Perfect. So what is next? All right. So let's go up a little bit. What I want to do is I want collect files to return a collection rather than to modify the files that we're sending in. So I'm going to do this. Say files, add all. All right, so I've moved this from a parameter to a recipient. Hang on, of course we don't have that anymore. So we're gonna I'm gonna remove the second parameter from the method collect files. All right, so it just receives a directory. Okay, that should be good. Files is used in the method body. That's okay. I'm gonna go ahead and do this. It's gonna get a little messy for a second. So this now needs its own files that it will then return. And it should, instead of a void, should, no, not Shift F6. F6. Don't want to move it. Sorry. What I want to do is I want to change its signature. No. Yeah, I want to change its signature. Okay. Great. Of course, it needs a name. Okay. So now, if the directory is a file, then I want to go ahead and return. I want to add it. Otherwise, what I'm going to do is come down here, file add, and this needs to be that is not correct. Add all. Okay, so now all that, but this doesn't return anything. So this is where we were talking about, hey, if this is supposed to be unique, let's make sure that it's unique. So we're going to do a return files stream distinct collect collectors to list. Okay, so what we've told it is, look, I added a bunch of stuff to this files. This is not necessary here. Okay, make sure it works. Oh, what did I do? There we go. Yep. Okay. So just to go through that again before we actually commit it. So extract files now calls collect files, passing it the file from the container, blah, 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 right? This no longer has anything that modifies. We do add, right? This, I think what we could do is and we don't need the else. Good. Okay. So let's go ahead and commit that. Very good. Good. Okay. All right, so we mentioned that extract files is calling collect file, and it's basically, it iterates through our class containers, then calls collect file, getting the file out of the container itself. Now, ultimately, what we want to do is stop working with files directly and work primarily with the class container. The reason we want to do that is I believe that we're going to be able to actually start pushing some of this responsibility into the containers as they get more intelligent, which will be a part of the decomposition of FileManager. So let's just start with, we want to not pass the file. We want to actually just pass the container, and we're going to do that with an interim method here. So great. The first thing this is going to do is be really lazy, and it's going to say so now it's just calling our original collect files. I'm going to move this down so it's out of our way. So the new collect file is calling the original collect file. Let's make sure that works. Great. Okay. Advantage we have here is that, or at least as we're moving towards our goal here, we now have a container in collect file, and it turns out that our containers know a little bit about themselves. So, for example, right here, if the thing that just got passed in is actually a file, then just go ahead and add it to our list of files and be done. Otherwise, we do this for loop. So if it is a file, well, our containers are either a directory or an archive. And that might be a jar, a war, or a zip. All other files have already been rejected. So we can say if container is an instance of our archive class container, then what do we want to do? We're going to return an array list with a single element, and that element is the file from our container. All right, that is exactly what's happening here. We're taking a file from our container, right? File from our container. We're checking to see, is it a file? If it is, we add it to an array list of files and we return it. Same thing here. Okay. Run the tests. And we're golden, which means that all of this is now redundant. And the tests still pass. Okay, so getting to this piece is going to be a little bit more complicated, but let's save what we've got so far. To collect files. And let's just double check. Yep, very good. All right, in the spirit of moving things into class container as soon as possible, I'm actually going to pull this out as a method. And get array list is a terrible name. Let's call it collect container files just for a moment. You'll see why I'm doing this. Okay, so collect container files receives a container. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this instance method where into container, refactor it. Okay. So now it calls container collect container files. Let's make sure that passes. And of course, we don't want it to be collect container files. That seems silly. What we actually want it to be is collect files. Run them again. Great. So right now, if our container is an archive class container, then we just go ahead and call collect files on it. And otherwise, we call our original collect files, which actually iterates through a directory. So we're still going to want to work on this, but we're beginning the process of moving this responsibility into our class container. All right, so we've saved that. I did that offline, didn't record it, but made that commit. Let's actually look at it. There it is. Start to move collect files into class container. Great. Okay. Tests are passing, of course. The next thing we want to do is let's collapse this guy and change it such that we're always using a container. So it's going to get a little messy, but it's not too bad. So I'm going to actually just go ahead and tell it to inline the method. And it's calling itself. So I have to inline this only and keep the method for now. But we'll fix that in just a second. So boom, okay. So what's happening now? So this one's still here, but we're going to get rid of it in just a moment. Let's make sure that actually worked. Okay, it worked. This is a little messy looking though, right? So we have the directory, we have a list from the directory, we have blah, blah, blah. Let's take care of this one piece at a time. The first thing I want to do is I want to change this so that it is calling the same basic instance, and then we can get rid of this version of the method. So instead of passing in a file, what we need to do is pass in a container. And the way that we're going to do that is we need to use our factory to turn this file into a class container of the right type. So, and actually this file isn't quite what we're looking for. I mean, it is, but what we need is to pass in its actual path in order to instantiate the right container. So here, let me just show you what I'm talking about. We're going to do class container factory, get container, file. It doesn't like that. What it actually needs is get path. Okay, now the issue is what? It is that we need a try catch around this. We're going to surround it with a try catch. And now that method calls itself, and nothing is calling this one anymore. We can safe delete it. Gone. Confirm that it actually was a safe delete. Okay. Now, there's a bunch of stuff in here. I'm not sure that we need it all. So yeah, directory equals container get directory. Collection files as an array list, that's fine. I think we can actually do something different here. We can say instead of all that, so we're getting the directory files, we're checking its length, we're getting a file out of that. You know, there's a lot here. I think actually what we can do is we can say, let's get a string, we'll call it file name, and we're going to get that from our directory list, right? So we can get rid of this. This doesn't know what to do because this now is actually file name. So we get to file, if accept file, add it, else if it is a directory, then call ourselves again. Keep on rolling and then return the uniques. So I think we are pretty good with that as well. All right, now we're part of the way through this refactoring, and it's in a little weird space. I'm going to leave it this way for a little while. So far the container kind of understands collect files, but not fully. So it's still over here in FileManager. If it's an instance of this, then we call it. It's actually over here, not in the archive class container. So we're really halfway through this thing. The challenge is that I've tried a couple of times so far to figure out ways to pull this into a directory class container. And what keeps falling apart is this accept file right here. So accept file needs to know if it's a valid container, if we need to accept a file class. Like some of this stuff can go away, but accept file class can't. So valid container kind of falls away because only valid containers can become a class container in the first place. So we don't need to check that anymore, but we do need, if it's a class file that we're looking at, is it actually a file? Again, that falls away. But this right here, accept class file name. So fundamentally what's happening is way back here, as we're starting to iterate through these files, we are either taking, if we get an archive, a jar, a war, or a zip, we're just adding it to our list of files. If we come across a class file, we need to know, does this have a $sign in the name, and are inner class files allowed? If inner class files are allowed and it has $sign in the name, we go ahead and move it into our collection. Otherwise, we don't. If it's a class file but not an inner class file, we add it to our collection, right? If it's a directory, we actually traverse through that directory looking for other class files or archive files. So it's this notion of an acceptable class file name that is based on whether or not we accept inner classes, and kind of the way that whole thing is sort of welded together right now. It was difficult to unravel this. So I want to focus someplace else for a minute, which is actually going to allow us to ultimately come back to this. And just stick with me. It's going to take us more than this episode, but we will get there. Okay, so what I want to take a look at is right now we've got this thing. What we've done is we have an array list of class containers, and we're adding stuff to it, to build up this kind of list. What I want to do is I want to make this a little bit smarter. I want to introduce class containers. I basically just want to extend an array list of class container. Then let's move this up one. Then this becomes class containers. See if that works. So what I'm doing is I'm taking this primitive and I am wrapping it in a class. So now I'm going to be able to start adding behavior to the collection itself. Okay, so it doesn't have any real behavior as of yet. Let's go ahead and move the inner class to upper level. ClassContainers is great. Go ahead. Done. Test should still pass. So we've now introduced this notion of class containers collection class, and that doesn't need to be there. Great. That looks right. Introduce class containers. Good. Okay. So class containers is going to help us out. What's going to start happening is there is some behavior right now that is in the FileManager that we're going to be able to start to push to the containers collection itself, and kind of condense FileManager down smaller and smaller. All right, so let's start with, I want to wrap extract files, and I want to do this so that we're staging for a future refactoring. So ultimately, I think extract files is actually going to go into class containers. So the first thing I want to do is I'm just going to make a minor change here so that there is a version of extract files that receives collect containers. That'll actually make it easier for me to do the refactoring in the end. So pretty straightforward, not a whole lot to this. There we go. Made up basically a call to a new instance, told it to create that, and then, here we go. All of the tests actually pass. So that's good. We're going to leave that sit for a minute, and we're going to move to a different refactoring. Remember, we talked about not being able to accept this concept of accepting inner classes not working. We're going to actually move that into class containers as well. Now, there's a bit of a challenge here, but this is a small enough change that it really won't take that much effort. So we just got to watch for where accept inner classes is actually being referenced. This is going to do a little weird thing where it actually passes FileManager to us, but then accept inner class on FileManager is private. No big deal. We're actually going to just create the concept of accept inner classes in class containers. So we'll add that field, and then we're going to go change the signature of this thing so that FileManager doesn't even get passed in since we're not actually using it. And then we're going to go see what effect that had on FileManager itself. So let's get rid of that. Do that. Okay, we're good. Now let's go take a look at FileManager. And here we want to get rid of the concept of accept inner classes as a field in FileManager. So let's just go ahead and call our class containers and tell it to accept inner classes. So accept inner classes true for class containers. Great. Now the challenge is that FileManager still has a concept of accept inner classes, which we're going to see when we go to safe delete it. Oh, no, you can't do that. It's actually got one. Where is it being used? Let's see. It is being used right here, where we check to see if we can accept inner classes. Well, that's fine. Let's just ask our class containers if we can accept inner classes. Except the challenge here is that method does not yet exist. So let's tell it that's what we want. We're going to get a compilation error. We're going to go ahead and Alt-Enter on that. It's going to ask us to either create the method, so that's what we'll do. Boom, it's created. What is it supposed to do? It's supposed to return our Boolean except inner classes. Okay, that's now good. And if we go back, that's good. So now the concept of except inner classes is no longer a property of FileManager, but is a property of our class containers. Let's make sure the test pass. All right, so we're going to call that a wrap for episode 5. In this episode, we've done a few things, and where we are right now is we've set ourselves up where we actually have this concept now of class containers. So we've taken up basically our primitive, which was a list of class container, and we have turned it into a class in and of itself, and we're starting to move responsibility into that. The first thing we've done is we moved the concept of whether or not we accept inner classes. And then we are going to start moving other things such as extract files, which receives class containers, will ultimately move into class containers itself, become a responsibility of it, as we continue our efforts to basically chunk down FileManager until we've moved these varying responsibilities into some better homes. But again, that's it for episode 5. Again, if you're enjoying the series, please, give it a thumbs up. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. And I will see you in episode 6.